Let's make your first loaf of sourdough.
To get our starter going for the next day, we're going to feed 5 grams of a mature starter with 50 grams warm water, 50 grams bread flour. Using warmer water at this time of day because inside the house is about 65 degrees. Next morning, after about 8 to 10 hours, we're going to add 100 grams of that active starter, 280 grams of 90-degree water. Same difference in this situation. It's going to be a really cold environment, so we want to keep our dough temperature anywhere from like 78 to 80 degrees. Or it can take a very long time and keep it hard to track. Add the rest of that bread flour and salt. We're just going to mix it until nice and shaggy. And once it gets too stiff to work with a spoon, switch to a soaking wet hand, squeeze it in, make sure everything's hydrated. We're going to cover up and let it rest for 30 minutes. We're going to do 3 sets of what we call stretch and folds. Same thing, get your hands really wet. Clear your dough from the bowl. Grab one corner, pull it all the way up and over the other side. We're going to go north, south, east, west. Just kind of making like crisscross, and this is going to help strengthen the gluten in the dough, even out temperature, and then kind of even out the fermentation throughout the dough. This is a pretty stiff dough as far as sourdough goes, so it should be a little bit easier to work with than my usual stuff. My usual stuff's at 75% hydration. This is at 68. We're at 77 degrees dough temp right now. That's pretty close to my range. I want to stay in that 78 to 80 degree range. We're going to do another rest. We're going to do 2 more sets of these. It's pretty self-explanatory after this. All we're doing is just building gluten development, and as you're going along, you should feel the dough starting to resist you more. You'll get less and less stretch and folds. When you feel that dough resist, quit, let it rest. On this last set of folds, I'll just pick it up, let it tuck on itself, do one more round of stretch and folds, then I'm going to dump it down on the table and round it off. We're just trying to build a lot of tension in the dough before we leave it alone for the rest of the bulk fermentation. And bulk fermentation starts as soon as that starter hits the flour. I usually roll for about a 3.5 to 4 hour time frame at 78 to 80 degrees. If you're a lot colder, this may take all the way up to like 8 to 10 hours, but this is why you need to watch your dough temperature, and we're going to be looking for that nice volume rise. Now we've come up about 50%. It's not quite to that 1 liter mark. It clears easily from the bowl, and I've noticed a good volume increase. From now on to the pre-shape, no flour at this stage. You're going to dump it out. Do that last stage right before you put it in for bulk ferment. Just round it off into a nice tight ball. Once it's nice and smooth and not tacky, let it rest for 20 minutes. Drop a little bit of rice flour, a little bit of all-purpose flour on top. Smooth it out on top, and we're going to do our final shaping. Flip it out over smooth side down. Smush into a smooth rectangle. We're going to do 1 fold and a half. Take one side to the center. And then take the other side to the center just the same way. Close up that open hole at the end. Then we're going to just pinch it together and turn it back over on its bottom. Round it off into a nice ball. For this final proofing stage, you're just going to need a vessel to help maintain shape over this long process. If you do a room temp proof, this could take 2 to 3 hours, and then you can bake it right away. I usually like to throw it in the fridge for a cold proof for 6 to 24 hours. This just helps develop texture and flavor in the bread, but depending on your schedule, you make it do with whatever you want. This is about an 8 to 9 inch bowl. It goes from a narrow base to a wide taper. Any kind of bowl like this will work. Just grab a tea towel, dust with flour, drop your dough in smooth side down. We're going to cover it up, let it proof for about an hour and a half. After that hour and a half, it's doubled out nicely in the bowl, barely passes the poke test, so it still needs a little bit of time. I threw it in the fridge for about 6 hours to work with my schedule. Once you hit that 6 hour mark, preheat your oven to 450 degrees for 15 minutes. While you're doing this, dump your dough out in some parchment paper, and you can score it up with a bread lom or scissors, whatever you want. You can just take some scissors and just make some hatch marks across it. I'm just having fun with this. I haven't done a boule in a long time. We scored the dough just so we can control where the dough expands at. If we don't score it at all, it could bust open at a random seam and not look as pretty in the end. If you don't want to score, you can always go for a no score, see how it turns out, just for an experiment. We're going to bake this at 22 minutes lid on and then 20 to 25 minutes lid off at 450 degrees in this Dutch oven. I like to spritz with water right before I close the lid to help with extra steam development. That helps you get the nice crispy crust and extra bubbles. 22 minutes later, we take the lid off. I throw it in for about 5 more minutes and then dump it out for an open bake the rest of the time. This helps really even browning in my oven. I tend to have a lot of hot spots, so I like doing it this way for a single loaf. Look at that beautiful loaf. I'll go ahead and stop talking so you hear this crispy, crackly crust. That's some good stuff. You can use the same recipe and use it in a batard style shape. You just have to have a different proofing vessel. Both of these work really well. Let's cut into this. Nice crispy crust, good coloring, nice fluffy white interior. This is a straight bread flour recipe. We're just keeping it nice and fluffy. Crispy crust. Nothing beats fresh home-made sourdough. Now, if you're wondering how to store this, I would take this into nice long slices, stack them up, wrap in plastic wrap after about 2 days of baking, stick them to a freezer bag, and just take them out and let them thaw overnight, or just pop them in the toaster after spritzing them. On our next episodes, we're going to start talking about inclusions. This is where it starts to get really fun. Jalapeno cheddar, cranberry walnut, and my new personal favorite is this chocolate pecan loaf. This is such good stuff right here. It eats like a pecan pie, but have all the great things of sourdough. A little more complex steps to it, and a little more hands-on work that you have to work on your skills, but it is really fun to work on. If you make this loaf of sourdough bread, tag me on Instagram and let me see how you did. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.